What's up, everyone? This is Frank. I want to welcome our Patreon community. This is our Week 7 recap. Just wanted to start off by saying I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I know this is not my normal setup. I am actually traveling. Um, so this has kind of been a last minute thing that I put together because I want to make sure I deliver the content to my Patreon community. And I appreciate you guys as always. We're going to be talking about the games that went on. I got to watch quite a few of them. And we're going to talk about some of the big plays that we saw, some of the big performances, some of the teams punching their tickets, and some teams that are season are coming to an end, at least for playoff hopes wise. But again, apologize for the poor quality. I don't have all my tech and gizmos and stuff like that. But let's make the best of it, and let's talk about the different games. So let's go through it. It's going to be a little bit, try to move through it a little bit quicker than normal, because I don't have everything, all my resources at my disposal. But first one's up, Double A North Rockland at Carmel. And Carmel winning 14-6, going to 6-1, dropping North Rockland down to 5-3. And let's start with North Rockland. This eliminated them from playoff contention with this loss. Because of the loss to Ossining, Ossining had the tiebreaker over them in league play. And offensively, it really struggled to run the ball. It was rainy, it was really ugly out, and they needed to establish the run because normally their offense is not, it's not accustomed to passing the ball a lot, and they really need to deliver running the football. And unfortunately, that did not happen in this game. The only touchdown they had was on the defensive side. So 41 total yards rushing. Their running back in Savor, he had 48 yards. I'm sorry, he had 41 yards. They had 48 yards passing, so under 100 yards total. And because they couldn't run the ball, they had to rely on the pass. I mean, Hamilton had to pass it 19 times, and they only completed 5 passes for 33 yards and also had an INT, right? So turnovers have also been an ugly thing that have hurt North Rockland continuously in their losses, and it hurt them again this time around. They had 2 turnovers. One was an INT, one was a fumble. And just not enough offense, unfortunately, against a very stout, strong defensive group in Carmel. And defensively, I thought they played a really strong game. I mean, they only allowed about 240 yards. So the defense really, I thought, played strong. Vate had a fumble recovery for a touchdown and 10 tackles. Farrar was very active defensively, led the way with 15 tackles, also had 5 receptions for 33 yards. Um, but because the offense they just couldn't get things going, it really put a lot of pressure on the defense. And again, giving up one touchdown, which was on like pretty much a jump ball, which was a really good play by Santiago on Carmel. Pretty good coverage, but really nice play by them. And the other one was a rushing touchdown that was really well blocked. But overall, defense played really well. But this kind of opens up a bigger picture, right? And I know North Rockland very frustrated not making the playoffs, even though being 5-3, they played 6 playoff teams this year, and they were 3-3 versus them. They had a win versus Monroe Woodbury in Section 9 to go to the playoffs. They did lose to Ossining, and I mean, this is how it was set up. I know that they're frustrated on, hey, can we have a system where, it takes into account strength of schedule? And then you can't really have 2 leagues, right? You'd have to do a ranking 1 through 8, which is what they call Pioneer system, which B uses, and teams complain about that. So there's not a perfect solution, but where I do agree with some kind of the North Rockland frustrations is I do think teams, in some way, we have to create a system where playing a tougher schedule and playing a week 0 tough opponent should give some beneficial factor to the teams. I saw some really strong teams playing real tough opponents. You mentioned Somers going out of state, playing a tough Rampo team in Jersey, Arlington playing Kellenberg, North Rockland playing Monroe Woodbury, New Rochelle playing Newburgh. And then you've even had some rivalries that have kind of changed in Section 1 because of the different classes. Rye playing Harrison, right? So those are some really good ones. I agree that there should be some value in playing that week 0 game in the overall structure of things, especially playing good opponents. Because I don't want teams just to pick up a game and play weaker opponents so they can beat up on them. And I've seen teams do that as well. So where do you find the middle ground here is a great question. But I also don't want to force teams to do week 0 if their team's not ready, right? So I do think if you play a real quality opponent week 0, there should be some benefit, but you don't want to entice picking up poor, teams that are much smaller than you or not as a powerful program as you, or if you're not ready, forcing yourself to play week 0. So it's a very interesting topic. I do think that can definitely dive into, but that's that on the North Rockland thing. But they brought up a good point. Let's talk about Carmel. And offensively, it wasn't a huge performance offensively. They did rush for 155 yards, but they only averaged about 2.8 yards a carry. And North Rockland's defense played very well. and led, by the way, by running back Tristan. And I don't know if this is just an error, but they have him down, Tristan Cashworloo. And if that's not a thing, I think it should be a thing because I think that's pretty damn cool. And he definitely led the way running the football, had over 100 yards on 42 carries. So he's been a real bell cow for this team. Also had one of the touchdowns. Um, but man, carrying the ball 42 times, he really had to carry the load. And he's just very strong, hits the hole very hard, and really can just take a lot of punishment. He's so important for their offense. And then quarterback Nunez, who I didn't think had his best game, 7 to 13 for 86 yards and a touchdown, also 30 yards rushing. Did have a fumble, but boy, Santiago I thought had a really strong performance on the offensive side. You know, when you get in these really tight, close games, you need your big time playmakers to make them. Santiago had one of those huge ones on one of the big touchdown catches, kind of just jumping over the defender. Very good coverage. He had 4 receptions for 51 yards as well. The defense, though, that has been the story. The last 2 weeks, they've been very strong all year, but the last 2 weeks they have been dominant. And I hope, you know, if I'm Carmel, I want to play as many rainy, ugly games as possible because what they do really well is stop the run. And if it gets ugly out and teams are not very good at passing, it's such a benefactor for this Carmel defense. They only allowed 74 yards total now, 2 straight games of allowing less than 100 yards. So really strong performance. They forced 3 turnovers. They led the way with Matt Risley, 21 tackles in this defensive line. Forrester, Robles, Hibbert, Mercer, and they rotate guys in. It makes it really difficult to run in between the tackle boxes, and they bring their force players pretty much right outside the tackle box. So they're really forcing you to hit the edges fast or hit the off tackle very fast underneath those force guys and throw the ball because running in between the tackles is tough. And also, how about Brian McGorry? He's another guy who made some big plays in this one. Had an INT, had a fumble recovery. They're the number 1 seed in the playoffs in their league. They won their league the previous week. Let's talk about another game, a matchup. Clarkstown South at Clarkstown North. Huge rivalry game. And Clarkstown South winning 44-7, going to 3-4. Clarkstown North drops to 1-6. And let's talk about Clarkstown South. They clinched the number 3 seed in the South league. Quarterback Colin Holder, 6-9, 58 yards, had an INT, but he rushed the ball very well. 96 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. Overall, the team ran the ball pretty effectively. Kevin Butler, again, had a monster performance. He had 74 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, but boy, he was everywhere defensively. 16 tackles and 5 tackles for loss, and this defense really dominated. And I know Clarkstown South, at times the offense can be extremely explosive, and then at times they could stall and throw a bunch of turnovers, but they played a pretty good performance in this one, especially defensively. And the defense, I think, has been pretty darn consistent. Now, on the north side, they were battling for that last playoff spot. Unfortunately, they got down a lot in the first half, which ended up being huge for them. And CM Barry had an INT, but the offense really struggled to move the ball consistently, and that's what ended up hurting them and losing this game. Next matchup, B matchup, Hen Hut at Edgemont. Edgemont winning 31-14, going to 2-4. Hen Hut dropping to 1-6. And both teams were out of the playoffs, but this was, again, 2 teams. Hen Hut, I thought, was improving overall. Edgemont was a very scrappy team. And Hen Hut offensively, Justin Parkes helped leading the way. Did have an INT on 3-6 passing, 62 yards rushing and a touchdown. Kyle Pesky, who we've talked about him the last couple of weeks for Hen Hut, he had another strong performance with 86 yards and a touchdown, also 6 tackles and a forced fumble. Defensively, you know, you had Bescom had an INT. Izzy Andrade had 6 tackles, but boy, Hen Hut struggled to stop the run game of Edgemont. They were really, really strong. And Edgemont is a scrappy unit. I know they've had some tough losses. Defensively, they've given up a lot of points, but they did a good job of forcing some turnovers on Hen Hut and limiting some big plays. And Joey Sato had a tremendous game in this. 2 rushing touchdowns. He had big plays blocking, receiving, making big tackles for them. This was one of those put on tape moments for him. I thought he was really good in this one. Their quarterback Larson also making some big plays, but this offensive line is not huge. They handled the size of Hen Hut pretty well, and defensively, again, I mentioned, gave up a lot of points these last couple weeks, but forcing turnovers and the offense dominating things, getting the win. Let's talk about the next matchup, Eastchester. In an A matchup, Eastchester at Horace Greeley, and Eastchester winning 54-6. And boy, Eastchester locking that number 2 seed in the South League offensively. It's led the way by their quarterback in Aiden Schultz. He was tremendous. Again, he's having a very strong season, now surpassing over 1,000 yards. Passing, he was 10 of 12 for 162 yards, 2 touchdowns. Also running the ball. He is so important for this offense. He is, again, the orchestrator. But he's not the only one. Joe Garba, he was tremendous. 175 yards and 2 touchdowns in this game as well, making huge plays. Um, they have different guys who can carry the rock, but it all starts with Aiden Schultz. And I thought this offensive line was absolutely dominant offensively. And defensively is one of my favorite units that I've watched so far in A. They've only allowed 6 points. Now they've allowed 7 or less points, 6 out of the 8 games that they've played. This is a unit that's got playmakers at each level. They really get after you. I really like this defense, and if each is going to go places, it is, riding big plays with Aiden Schultz and playing good defense. Kieran McCluskey had a pick six and a fumble recovery. He made some huge plays on the defensive side. And for Greeley, they were also battling for that last spot, but they got down so big in the first half. And the tiebreakers, again, when it's a three-way tie, you go down to overall record and points allowed in first half. So when everyone's tied with the league record and overall record, points allowed in first half is huge. So teams that kept it close in the beginning was a huge factor in this one. Greeley could not. Offensively, they really struggled down the stretch. And now quarterback Osh, condolences go out to him. Got a bad injury in this game. He's a very talented player. I'm excited to see his recovery and his return. Let's go to the next game. We got Byram Hills at Lakeland, and this was a big game with playoff implications. And Lakeland winning 13-0, going to 5-3. Byram Hills dropping to 2-5. And starting with Byram Hills, this loss eliminated them from the playoffs. And a big thing that has hurt them all year is turnovers. They had another 2 turnovers this game. Not being able to establish the run consistently, creating some balance, has also been an issue. I mean, we know that they have some talented skill guys, but just a mixture of not executing, offensive line being inconsistent. Because defensively, I thought they played a pretty strong game against a pretty powerful Lakeland offense, and they did a solid job of limiting the run game, but just not enough offense. So when I look at Lakeland, they clinched a number 5 seed in B. First playoff since I think 2019, if I got my numbers correct. And boy, what a game by Kyle Gallagher. Wide receiver and defensive backs had a really strong year. 7 receptions, 100 yards and a touchdown. Also 26 yards rushing, had a fumble recovery on defense. He's been a big playmaker for them on both sides of the ball. Their quarterback, Leonard, wasn't a huge explosive offensive performance from him, but super efficient. 12 of 18, 115 yards and a touchdown and no INTs. To me is a big one. Paula Castro had 40 yards rushing and a touchdown. But it was this defense that really came out firing. They did a really good job. Bubba Baumeister, great name by the way, 5 tackles. Nick Oliva had an INT. Nick Ferrante also had a sack. So again, if Lakeland can play some strong defense and offense can get off to some quicker starts, Lakeland's also a very dangerous team to keep an eye on in B class. They win 13-0. Now let's go to the next game, A matchup. Another big playoff implications. We have Brewster at Mahopac in A, and Mahopac winning 21-0, going to 5-3. Brewster dropping to 2-5. And let's start with Brewster. The loss eliminates them from the playoff spot. And this has been an offense that has struggled all year long, and a big part of that is the passing game, and turnovers have been an ugly thing. They had 3 turnovers, 2 INTs, and a fumble. They passed for about 99 yards. Now they rushed for 112 yards, and they had some drives, but they just could not finish. They could not finish drives, either leading from turnovers, which they were backed up, or turnover to end the drive. Some big negative plays on penalties, getting them in second, third, and long. But again, they do, quarterback-wise, have to make some smarter decisions. Now, defensively, I thought they played pretty well. It was a 7-0 game for a long period of time. Rienzi had an INT, especially up front in the defensive line, linebacking crew. Marco Accurso was all over the place. I mean, he had 10 tackles, Lamaro, Fox, making some plays, but I thought at the end they kind of wore down, and they got beat on the edge a couple times. They got beat on some counter action, which ended up hurting them. And for Mahopac, they clinched the number 4 seed in the North with a win, and it was the Danny Koch show. I mean, just look at his stat line. 149 yards rushing, all 3 of the touchdowns. He had 5 catches for 51 yards. He had a pick on defense and a fumble recovery. I mean, he dominated and took over the game for his team. Now, defensively, they've done another good job where they've given up a bunch, quite a few yards, but they have strengthened as they got closer to their end zone, and they prevented points. And this is a defense that has forced turnovers in each game this year. So, again, that's a huge aspect in this one, giving their offense extra possessions and a nice victory. Let's talk about another matchup, AA Yonkers Forest at Mamaroneck. and American winning 26-6. They go to 5-2. Yonkers Force drops to 3-5. And Yonkers Force has been very competitive this year. I think the offensive, they played a very tough Mamaroneck defense. Offensively, at times, it's been extremely explosive, but Mamaroneck limited the big plays, and Yonkers Force couldn't really deliver on them. And when I look at Mamaroneck, they clinched the number 2 seed in B. What a great season for them. The coaches and players deserve a lot of credit. They were in the section title last year. They lost a boatload of players, and still to get the number 2 seed this upcoming season is kudos to that group. Quarterback Mackey was really solid at a touchdown pass. Jack Davidson is someone who's been making more and more plays down the stretch here. He had a touchdown reception, but T.J. Smith is such an important player for this team. 2 rushing touchdowns, but it's defensively. He really leads the way. 11 tackles, 3 tackles for loss. Shep had a field goal. And again, this defense as a whole at times has played at such a high level, only limiting Yonkers Force to 6 points, which was an explosive offense. Really strong performance at home, winning the game. We also have Scarsdale, who was at Mount Vernon, and they won via forfeit to go to 5-2. Mount Vernon had a bunch of players suspended due to a fight last week. Scarsdale clinches the number 2 seed in League A. And there's another group that Scarsdale made the playoffs last year, but they had a really strong year this year. 5-2, playing really strong defense. Offense just doing just enough. They run the option pretty well, keeps teams off balance, and this defense is really leading the way for them. And a lot of kudos to that program as well. Let's talk about a B matchup. We got Pleasantville at Nyack, and Pleasantville winning 36-8, going to 7-0. Nyack dropping to 3-4. And I'll start with Pleasantville. They were already the number 1 seed. They clinched that again. Last couple of seasons, they have proven to be one of the best programs in Section 1. Again, kudos to the kids, kudos to the coaches, going 7-0 again. Offensively, starts with Daniel Picard, 133 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. He passed 7,000 career total yards. He's going to go down as one of the most prolific backs in Section 1 history when all is said and done. Aiden Picard, 4 of 6, had a touchdown pass to Eric Coleman, who also had a fumble recovery. And defensively, Nyack can run the ball very well, and they did a really good job of absolutely slowing that down and really dominating for practically the entire game. And we know about Horrigan, Sadao, Hodzinski all making plays in this one. Another guy, Dylan Jennings, he was very active defensively in this game as well. For Nyack, they still clinched the 7th seed, even though it lost because of strength of schedule. They only had 1 turnover, right? So it's not like they turned the ball over a lot, but they just could not run the ball. It's a huge factor for them in getting the guys, these speed guys out on the edge and in the second level, and they just could not move the ball much. And defensively really had a tough time slowing down Daniel. So what they do get back into the playoffs. Let's talk about the next game, a matchup. We have Harrison at Pelham. Harrison winning 40-16. They go to 6-2. Pelham drops to 1-6. Harrison has the number 1 seed in the South. Offensively, to me, it's focusing on the run game, which is so important for this group with guys like Barcello, 94 yards rushing and a touchdown. And this offensive line dominating. And they have good size to them, not a lot of depth, but they have good size, good strength, and they need to dominate running the ball. And quarterback Citro, 7-13, 97 yards, 2 touchdowns. Lanza also stepping in at quarterback at times and running the ball. He had two total touchdowns as well. Also, he had a rushing touchdown at McLaughlin. Love to see him get more involved. He's such an impact player. Had a receiving touchdown, had an INT, also had a blocked field goal that he returned for a touchdown. He had his hands all over this game, and they need him to be a superstar if Harrison wants to make a run in the playoffs. But how about defensively? Most dominant performance. It wasn't their most dominant performance. This has been a really strong unit overall, but they had an INT. They had a field goal block for a touchdown. This defensive front 7 makes it very difficult to run the ball, and this is when I would, Harrison getting the number 1 seed. How many teams are fully buying Harrison? I think Harrison has a lot to prove in this playoffs, and I think they have the talent to definitely win a playoff game in this one. Pelham, on the other side, they clinched the number 4 spot. So even though they lost, but what I did like is Pelham was very, they were pretty competitive in the first half, and that was a key factor because points allowed in the first half is one of the tiebreakers, and so they ended up getting that, and so that was an important one. So even a loss, that's why I always focus in on teams. Always compete, right? You never know, and this was an important tiebreaker component for Pelham. Let's go to the next huge matchup. This is a big one in the B. It was kind of winner go home. Rhinebeck at Putnam Valley, and Putnam Valley winning 32 to nothing. Rhinebeck drops to 6-2. Putnam Valley goes to 5-2. And let's start with Rhinebeck. Obviously, not the way the season wanted to end, but they had a very strong season. They haven't had 6 wins in a season since 2014. So this has been a tremendous year, and quarterback Merkel was fantastic. And they had multiple players really step up in key moments to deliver big plays on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And a lot of credit to the kids and to the players. The way you turn seasons and programs around is by having kids come together and make big time plays and big moments and getting those victories. And Rhinebeck deserves a lot of credit for that. But let's talk about Putt Valley. With this win, they clinched the 8th spot in the playoffs. Quarterback Cunningham, who, again, the pass attack has always been very mixed with Putt Valley, but he has a good running component at 90 yards rushing and a touchdown. Had 1 or 2 passing for 20 yards. Ricky Meister really leads the way for this offense. He had 144 yards and 3 touchdowns. They ran the ball very well in this game, and that's kudos to this offensive line as well, moving people around. But the big thing that I really like about Putt Valley defensively, 0 points allowed. This has been a very strong defensive unit, especially their ability to stop the run and get after the quarterback. And we know about guys like Caden Glenn, who's being played, Alex Desage, but Andre Tarrant, he was huge in this one. Had 3 sacks in this game, had a fumble recovery. AJ Altrecci had a sack. Dobra is another guy we have seen make a lot of plays these last few weeks. He was also very active in this game with a fumble recovery. This defense had 5 sacks total. They really get after you, and if they, Putt Valley earning that spot really on the back of the run game and defense. Let's go to the next game. We have Hudson Valley Football League game, Tappan Zee at Spring Valley, and Tappan Zee winning 20-18. This was a very good game. In my opinion, 2 of the best teams I've seen so far in the Hudson Valley Football League. Tappan Zee going to 6-1, Spring Valley dropping to 5-1. And I'll talk about Tappan Zee. Owen O'Hara. I mentioned him in the preview show a couple times and in the precaps. This young man, 104 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's really been a key cog for this team on both sides of the ball. The defense in the tie game also had a go-ahead safety. I really like the way this defense has played. They've been very aggressive. They had a go-ahead safety with 2 minutes left. Jason Riley had an INT for a touchdown, which was a huge big-time play in this game that really changed momentum. But Tappan Zee continued to make plays and some tight games coming through, especially defensively. I really like the way Tappan Zee's playing on both sides of the ball. Now for Spring Valley, I thought the defense was very strong. Now they gave up a defensive touchdown and a safety, which is 9 points out of the 20. So, again, defensively, pretty damn strong. They are very aggressive, but offensively, they just made those big mistakes, right? We talk about the safety. We talk about the defensive touchdown. And that was the difference. And when you fight 2 even teams, that could be the big factor. But don't be shocked if we see these 2 teams play again. All right, let's go to the next game. Double A matchup. We have Arlington at Suffern, and Arlington winning 30-0. Arlington goes to 8-0. Suffern drops to 4-3. Both teams in the playoffs. Arlington, the number 1 seed, and they were just dominant. They had a dominant regular season, but this is really where the big prize is. This is where the season really takes shape for Arlington, right? It should be about winning the title. They have the talent. They had a dominant regular season. It's time now to rev it up for the playoffs. And for this game, their quarterback was Rosigno. Nice to see him back. He had a rushing touchdown. Nick DeGusto had a rushing touchdown. Russo had a rushing touchdown. So they were really running the ball very well in this one. Not a bunch of big-time yards against a very tough, Suffern defense, but they made the plays they needed to. But defensively, that's where things really revved up. They had a huge shutout in this one. 0 points for Suffern, led by Luke Lavello at 3 INTs, including a pick 6. But Gavin Porter is another guy who was very, very active in this game. And Suffern's offense, when I look at them, now they're the number 3 seed in A, but offensively, they have struggled the last couple weeks. And I know defensively, I really like this defensive unit, but they got to get things figured out very quickly. We're right into the playoffs offensively. I'm a big fan of that offensive line play that I saw for most of the season, but they got to get back to running the ball, opening up lanes with that offensive line, and playing strong defense. So a little bit worrisome there. All right, next game, Hudson Valley Football League. We got Ramapo at Walter Panis, and Walter Panis winning 33-26, going now to 2-5. Ramapo drops to 1-6. And let me start with Ramapo. This offense with Fabrice Adelson struggled passing the ball, only 1 of 6 passing, but one of them was for a touchdown. Did have an INT. He also had a rushing touchdown and an INT, so he was all over on this. He's such an important player for this team. The running back Perez also had a rushing touchdown. Montefleur was one on the receiving touchdown, but he also had a defensive touchdown on a fumble recovery. Zion Osborne also made a play on defensively. Now, when I look at this offense, had some big moments, and defensively, forcing 4 turnovers, including having a defensive touchdown. So what was the big issue? They gave up a whole lot of yards on the ground, and that's what ended up killing them in the end for Ramapo. Um, yeah, that was the key factor there. They did have an INT, like I mentioned, but they forced 4 turnovers and couldn't get the victory because they gave up a lot of big plays in yards. And when I look at Walter Pannis now, they have won 2 straight games, and guess what a key ingredient is that? Carlucci returning, and he was an absolute bell cow in this game. 37 carries, 289 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Also played defense with 8 tackles. He changes the dynamic in this game and in this team. Now winning a couple games in a row down the stretch. Walter Pannis starting to get a little warm. Let's go to the next game, double A matchup. We have Ossining at White Plains. Ossining winning 20-14. They go to 4-4. White Plains drops to 0-7. And Ossining, they with this win got the number 4 spot in League B. And this was, I think, a great moment for this program. And with this win, and in a moment where a chunk of their players were benched because of a fight last week. So, this is a tough situation because of the fighting, right? You wonder, with the season on the line, does coach let them play? And I really respect that. Coach said, no, these kids are still benched. We got to win without them. And they scored late in the fourth quarter. They were able to deliver. And Anthony LaFaro has been so important for this team in offense. Another 140 yards and 3 touchdowns, went over 1,000 yards rushing. So important in this game. Gio Jean-Pierre as well running the ball. He had over 100 yards. Those 2 guys combining over the last 2 weeks have been so important for this offense. And defensively, they've made some big plays. They had to stop White Plains, who was driving at the end of the game as well, to get the win. They get into the playoffs. And I also like that White Plains really battled until the end. So, this was a team that trying to get their first victory. Could have mailed it in, but they competed. And it was a really good game to watch. Ossining scoring on a counter play towards the end of the game in the fourth quarter. Let's talk about probably the biggest game of the week was this A matchup, Somers versus at Yorktown. And this was a heavyweight fight. And Somers winning 21-7. Somers goes to 7-1. Yorktown drops to 7-1. Heavyweight, physical, boatload of penalties, a lot of chirping, rainy monsoon type of game. But it was a fun game. And to me, let's start with Somers. This one clinches the number 1 seed in their league, and to me was the most impressive victory that I've seen from Somers this year. I mean, it was a 7-7 game. The offense really started off slow. They had 3 first quarter turnovers, and they needed a spark, and they turned to a trick play. And their wide receiver Iglesias kind of took a handoff, and he threw a pass. So he went outside the hash mark, saw Luca Plaga running down the field open, delivered a pretty nice strike to him for 42 yards, and that led to a Max Sullivan touchdown to get things going. But it was still back and forth, and at the end of the day, when it came down to the fourth quarter and into the second half, what really took over the game was this offensive line and rush game. And when the game gets ugly, the pass attack's not really working. Can you run the ball with physicality? And that's what they showed. They wore down Yorktown's defense. And Mason Kelly made that huge dominant run at the end to kind of seal the deal on a touchdown. Balancia had a rushing touchdown. So that was a key component for their offense. On the other side, defensively, they played a great game. They only allowed 163 yards to the number 1 offense in scoring points and 1 touchdown. So 163 yards, 1 touchdown against the top scoring offense. This defense was sensational. They only allowed also 74 yards in the air. I know it was rainy and ugly out, but 74 yards in the air, allowing less than 3 yards a carry, or about, I think, 3 yards on the dot per carry running the ball. And they were really tremendous in this game. And it was that defensive front 7 made it hard for Yorktown, who has run the ball pretty darn well. And this secondary deserves a lot of credit. They got a lot of pressure on Gonzalez. The secondary was pretty tight on some of these wide receivers outside a handful of plays. This was a well-rounded performance by this defense. And when I look at Yorktown, listen, they get the number 2 seed. I think these are the 2 best teams that I've seen so far this year. Way too many penalties that have killed them in key moments, and their inability to finish drives. They had, again, one of the touchdowns, had 3 first quarter turnovers, but really couldn't they really couldn't deliver on them, right? So that was a huge moment for them. And also in the fourth, they had like in the second half, they had a 9 minute drive that got stopped and they missed a field goal, right? So in these tight games, every play is really going to matter. Every inch matters. Um, Quarterback Gonzalez, 9 of 21 passing, so he's usually much more efficient than that on 80 yards. Their running back in Del Vecchio had a rushing touchdown. Costello made some nice plays in the receiving game, and Constantine also made some huge plays, but just offensively, they could not get things going, and finishing drives and finishing off of turnovers was a key one. You get 3 first quarter turnovers, you got to get more points than 7, right? So that was key for them. Defensively, I thought they played a really strong game. They were against a team that was bigger than them, brought a lot of pressure. Ryan Kane had an INT. Ryan Vogel was all over the field. He is a tremendous player. He had an INT and 10 tackles. Connor Duncan had 6 tackles. But I think the defense wore down, and they like to bring a lot of pressures, especially internally. And what Somers did, they washed them down. Right? They did a really good job blocking from the C gap and moving the defenders down the line and attacking right off tackle with the quarterback runs and their running backs. And it really started to wear them down until kind of the dam broke at the end. So I think Yorktown can recover from this. They showed that they can really compete with Somers. But it was a physical game. So interested to see how Yorktown responds. Let's talk about the next game, and that is Bronxville at Valhalla in a C matchup. And Bronxville winning 35-18. This one surprised me a little bit. Bronxville has put together a couple very strong weeks, and it really relied on this offensive line moving people in this rush attack. Davis Patterson had some big plays in this one, had a long rushing touchdown. He also had a couple passing touchdowns, one off of play action. This offense got humming against a physical Valhalla defense, and also defensively, they gave up a boatload of rush yards, but they had an INT touchdown by Gangemi, and they had a fumble recovery. So they forced a couple turnovers, and this offense and offensive line carried the way, making some big plays. When I look at Valhalla, what killed them offensively is the turnovers were absolutely huge. I mean, that was a big moment, especially that INT for a touchdown. Offensively, they were able to run the ball, but defensively, they gave up some big plays, which is pretty uncommon for Valhalla. They have, and some of them, but this defense has been a physical group. The front seven's been very physical. But they came up against a physical front in Bronxville, and Bronxville came out on top. So pretty surprising there on the Valhalla stuff. So the turnovers, and even though they were able to run the ball, giving up big plays on defense also really hurt them. Let's go to Double A now. We got John J. East Fishkill at RCK in a non-league game, but a big rivalry game. And John J. East Fishkill winning 42-0. John J. East Fishkill going to 6-2. RCK dropping to 1-6. John J. East Fishkill, which I'm going to focus on, got the number 3 seed in a nice, very bounce-back game after a tough game last week. Offensively, 19 first downs, 6 rushing touchdowns. I mean, this offensive line and rush attack really dominated. Quarterback Feliciano, 9 of 16 passing, 115 yards. He also had 2 rushing touchdowns on 69 yards rushing. I thought Crouch had a very strong game as well on both sides of the ball. And Fernandez on defense, 2 sacks. It's defensively getting a shutout. So defensively really responded from last week. Offensively, they got back to running the football with physicality. This offensive line really responded well. All right, guys, let's continue. I'm going through my notes here. The next one is a B matchup. We have Ardsley at the Briarcliff Hamilton football program, with Ardsley winning 41-0. Ardsley goes to 6-1. Briarcliff Hamilton goes to 2-5. When we look at Ardsley, they really dominated, and this was another team that needed to bounce back from last week, and they did so. They got the number 3 seed in the playoffs in B. Quarterback Randy had a couple nice touchdown passes and really dished the ball out to multiple different receivers, and this offensive line dominated. The rollout game was really strong in the pass game. I really like how the coaches attacked this one. And they had multiple different players make some plays for them. We had Chenard make some big plays. Silverman make some big plays. So getting back to what they do best is multiple guys making big plays and Rendy kind of being the orchestrator there. And this offensive line dominating. And defensively, back to being very disruptive. Made things very difficult for Briarcliff Hamilton. This was a really good, well-rounded victory for Ardsley to get back on track. Next game, I want to talk about B matchup Irvington at Hastings. Hastings winning 39-20. Hastings goes to 2-5. Irvington goes to 0-7. And Chris Callahan on the Irvington side threw the ball a lot, and he had made some big plays, 243 passing yards and a touchdown, but the turnovers were killer. 2 of them. And this offense had multiple turnovers in this game, which was the big factor. And defensively, again, continuing to struggle, giving up a lot of big plays. And when I look at Hastings, I think it was 3 or 4 passing touchdowns in this one. They had a pitch pass, excuse me, for a touchdown as well. This offense was really humming, and they attacked a defense. And Hastings' offense at times was really struggling, but they were attacking a defense that gave up a lot of big plays, and they executed. And Hastings gets the victory. Next game, I want to talk about Big A matchup, another big playoff one, which was an A. Fox Lane at John Jay Cross River. Fox Lane winning 24-21. Really good game here. Fox Lane goes to 4-3. John Jay Cross River goes to 2-5. Fox Lane winning on a last second field goal here by Jack Fabry, excuse me. And let's start with Fox Lane. This win got them into the playoffs as the number 3 seed. Had to win the last 2 games to do it, and they did, which was huge offensively. They did have turnovers that killed them. I think it was 3 turnovers again, which have killed them all season long, but they were able to run the ball, and I thought that was a huge factor in this one. In my opinion, when I was talking about this on the preview show, why I picked Fox Lane was I thought they were being able to run the ball into Clown Connors, 231 yards, 2 touchdowns. This offensive line was moving bodies, and they were able to overcome the turnovers. And defensively, Theo Friedman had a pick 6 in this game. They were up 21-0, and then they were allowing Cross River to get back in this game, which, again, was a huge one, mainly focused in on the turnovers, which was huge. When we look at John Jay, offensively, they struggled, but the defense was trying to get them back into it. Nick Russo had a forced fumble and fumble recovery for a touchdown. You had Savastano return the opening half kickoff on the third quarter for a kick return touchdown. Jack McRelease had an INT. He also had a touchdown. And then you had Arfeed, who had a really strong game as well on the defensive side in the defensive secondary. Berganza also had a fumble recovery. So, again, the turnovers almost killed Fox Lane and their playoff dreams and brought John Jay Cross River back in this one, but they just couldn't close the deal and gave up that last-minute field goal. Another huge game, and then this is nothing I didn't mention before the show, my team of the week, which I apologize for just mentioning at the beginning, just been so flustered with the traveling, is Pro River. Pro River is my team of the week, and now we're going to talk about their game, the Pro River at Nanuet, and kind of spoil it a little bit. But if you didn't know, Pro River won, and this is a huge rivalry, the Little Brown Jug game, league game, and this was another really good one. Pro River at Nanuet. Pro River winning 20-17 in overtime. Pro River goes to 6-1. Nanuet drops to 4-3. And let's start with Pro River. They clinched the number 4 seed here with the victory. They were down 14-0, and I was like, man, I picked Pro River, and I was like, Nanuet really came out firing, and then Pro River was struggling offensively. I was like, this game could be done. But Pro River comes back, gets the huge victory, scores late to tie, and then in overtime, get a huge stop, even though Nanuet gets the field goal, and they carry that momentum to score there. And Nick Espinal got the game-winning rushing touchdown in overtime. But Carlacci, he had a strong performance. 13 receptions, 120 yards, and a touchdown. And their quarterback, Whalen, really performed well. They couldn't run the ball very effectively for most of the game, so they had to go to the air. And he was 30 of 49 for 252 yards and 2 touchdowns. Michael Squalini, he had 10 receptions. And this offense did enough. It was struggle in the first half. The offensive line did a really good job in the second half protecting Whalen. And defensively, it was a little scary in the beginning because this is a strong defensive unit. Second half, they only allowed 66 yards rushing, and this defense made some big plays in key moments. In the overtime, had that huge sack that led to a field goal, which gave them the opportunity to score a touchdown to win the game when they got the ball. And Bellman and Nasaj coming together for that big sack. And this defense played really strong in the second half. Again, anyway, it was 14-0, limited them to 3 points in overtime after that moment. Big kudos to them. For Nanuet, though, they're still in the playoffs as the number 6 seed. They show, again, their capabilities that they can beat good teams. And they got off to a good start, and it was running the ball. And Duffy had over 100 yards. Stemmerman had a touchdown rushing. Elise had a big pass in this one. Jack O'Sullivan had that field goal in overtime. And defensively, they were dominant in the first half, but in the second half, big plays in the passing game hurt Nanuet. And that's what, unfortunately, hurt their chances to win in this one, going into overtime. But a really good game against 2 teams in the rivalry. This is what high school football is all about. Let's go to the next game. This is a B and Hudson Valley Football League crossover. Croton Harmon at Peekskill, and Croton Harmon winning 15-6. They go to 3-4. Peekskill goes to 4-3. Let's talk about Croton Harmon. This was a scrappy group. Jacob Jones had 2 rushing touchdowns here. They do just enough offensively, but what I like the most defensively, there's been a defense that have made big plays for them all season long. They had a safety. They limited Peekskill's big plays. I really like the way this defense played. They're not huge, but they're scrappy. They can push people around at times because they're strong. And when I look at Peekskill offensively, they've had a couple of hit or miss weeks now in a row offensively. They had 6 points here, 8 points the week prior, and then 6 points the week prior to that. So offensively, still trying to get back into a groove, and they're big on making some big plays, but they just can't get that consistency. Now defensively, this is again, they only allowed 13 points outside that safety. So this is a defensive group that really gets after it, makes it difficult for teams to score, but not enough offense. Let's go to the next game, Hudson Valley Football League. We got Poughkeepsie at Portchester, and really nice victory for Portchester, 23-6. They go to 3-4. This was a huge game. Poughkeepsie drops to 1-7. Big league game. Poughkeepsie, the offense struggled, and there was at times, again, I said in the preview, the offense still plays well, and defense does not. And then another game, it could be the other way around. In this game, I thought the offense struggled a bit. And when I look at Portchester, this is a defense that has struggled mightily in the Hudson Valley Football League, last in points allowed, but they really stepped up. And this was a huge victory for them, and big kudos, especially when it comes to the playoff spot. Let's go to the next game, B matchup. We have Rye at Sleepy Hollow. Rye winning 33-0. Rye going to 6-2. Sleepy Hollow dropping to 2-6. And I'm going to focus in on Rye here, and they have the number 2 seed. They've had now a couple dominant games in a row the last couple weeks, especially offensively. Quarterback A.J. Miller, 5 of 6, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns. I did not see Luliano play, so not sure about that. But Ty Ramachandran stepped in for him, did a really solid job. He had 51 yards rushing and a touchdown. Kesner had a receiving touchdown. Hess had a receiving touchdown. They have a plethora of weapons on the offensive side of the ball, guys getting back and playing. But defensively, again, getting that shutout. Archie Fenton was very active in this one. He had 7 tackles. Gonzalez, we know, has made plays for them all season long. I see Avadi had a fumble recovery. They started putting some of the backups and backup players in who also were pretty active in this game as well. So this was a dominant performance on both sides of the ball for Rye. They go into playoffs in a real groove. Let's go to the next game. This is a CD matchup. Haldane at Westlake, another very good football game. Westlake winning 16-14, and again a field goal at the end of the game. They go to 6-0. Haldane drops to 5-2. Let's start with Haldane. Offensively, 167 yards, and this is again I mentioned offensively. Last couple weeks they've at times hit hit a wall, and this time they went up against a Westlake defense that has now the last couple weeks have been really strong. And Van Tassel 7-14, not a lot of big plays in the passing game at 59 yards and a touchdown. 49 yards rushing. Gianchinta, only 49 yards rushing and a touchdown. So, again, to me, those are 2 big horses there on the offensive side. But they're going up against a Westlake defense that has a lot of speed. Now, Murray did have their receiving touchdown. And defensively, I thought they played pretty darn well. Corliss, he had 12 tackles in INT. He was very active. Stubblefield, all 17 tackles in this game for him. He was all over the place against a very fast Westlake team. Nate Stickle also 13 tackles. This Haldane defense, is an impressive group offensively. Those 2 big guns, if they can't get going and making big plays, that's where Haldane, can't put up a lot of points. But this was a very good football game against a very talented, and they took them down to the wire. They had the lead all the way up to the end. When I look at Westlake, again, the field goal by Anthony Negrelli at the end was a huge one. Big time kick there. And it was set up by this long reception by Napoli. Had to break a tackle in open field at the second level and really set it up towards the end of the game. And then defensively, they had to stop Haldane at the end. So really nice comeback victory for them. Offensively, Chris Callie had a rushing touchdown. Chris Archiello had a rushing touchdown as well. So they did just enough offensively and making some big plays by some of the big playmakers. Quarterback had to, again, scramble for it and make a throw over there to the Napoli at the end. But this defense, again, only allowing 167 yards and really slowing down Van Tassel and Giancinto is no easy task. We saw a dominant performance against Dobbs Ferry a couple games ago, and now coming back to this against two top guns like that and limiting them to 167 yards is very impressive. Well-rounded victory for Westlake, especially defensively. Let's go to a CD matchup. We have Tucko at Woodlands. Tucko winning 34-20, and boy, Tucko's offense continues to roll. Jack Scolachico, super efficient game again. 16 of 20, 227 yards and 2 touchdowns. They had 154 yards rushing as well, and Liberati leading the way with 41 yards and a touchdown. But, that passing game, guys, the Schneider, who had 7 receptions, 117 yards and a touchdown, also had an INT on defense. Benke had a receiving touchdown and also an INT on defense. This defense gave up a lot of big yards, but forcing three turnovers and having 4 sacks, and that was the big one in this one that really helped them defensively. For Woodlands, the offense was very explosive. I mentioned that again when I talked about Tucko's defense. Beside Campbell, 14-27, 267 yards and 3 touchdowns. He made some big-time plays in this one, and it was led by Jaden Roberts, who had 160 of those yards and a couple touchdowns leading the way. But defensively, could not slow down this Tucko pass attack. Super efficient. Last 2 games, guys. Let's talk about New Rochelle at Yonkers Brave in AA matchup. New Rochelle winning 40-22. Neuro's offense is starting to warm up. Talked about the last couple games in the preview. Starting to put up some points. Raiden Davis made some big plays. Corey Dawson had a rushing touchdown. I believe it was him on the kick return touchdown as well. And they did a really good job getting to the outside and off tackle. And Maple made some big plays. James, the quarterback, rushing. So offense is starting to get things going. Only issue I have is defensively. Yonkers Brave at times shows some they can make big plays, and they scored 22 points in this one as well. New Rochelle's defense definitely has stepped up, especially going into the playoffs. They clinch the number 4 spot. Finally, in a C matchup, we got Dobbs Ferry at Albertus Magnus, and Dobbs Ferry winning 39-0. Dobbs Ferry goes to 4-2, and Dobbs Ferry getting back to running the football very well. Ran over 200 yards, led by Patrick McGoey at 139 and 3 touchdowns. Jack Staub had another 84 and a touchdown. Jackson Kearns got his first varsity touchdown, so congratulations to him. And this defense dominated. And that's what you wanted to see. I thought the defense has been playing very well. It was the offense that slowed down in that loss against Westlake. They got back on track. But the defense led by Marty O'Leary, who was really good. I think he's been really good all year long. Nastic Smith, Sawyer Shamansky, who we've seen a couple of weeks ago, also leading the way for this defense, getting the shutout. They have big-time playmakers at each level as well in this defense. All right, guys. Again, a lot of games to go through. Appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in. We'll be posting my defensive and offensive rankings per class, top team rankings, and my final offensive line rankings for the regular season. We are getting to playoff times. I know C&D has one more regular season game, but it is playoff season, and we're going to be focusing in on the playoff game. So we'll be covering the last regular season game in our game picks for Week 8. But for the other leagues that are in the playoffs, we're just going to be focusing in on the playoff games for them. So appreciate you guys as always. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of this week, and we'll see you all very soon.